Revenge with Karen.
They say you know your worth when the company starts to panic the second you take a sick day. Well, mine sent 4 Slack messages, 2 emails, and a junior dev to bang on my apartment door when I was out with the flu. That's how critical I'd become. Not that they ever said it out loud, no. I was our secret weapon, which is just HR code for do everything, take no credit, and don't ask questions. Ever built something from scratch with your own damn hands? Watched it save the company from a 6-month backlog, only to have it rolled out under someone else's name like you were a ghost in the server room. That was Tuesday for me. Every damn Tuesday. The company, let's call it Nexico Systems, ran like a frat house dressed in khakis and clickbait leadership quotes. Friday meetings were a pissing contest of who could use the word synergy loudest while showing off charts made by the interns. The dudes with legacy last names got the corner offices. The women who didn't laugh at their jokes got put on the probationary improvement track. I wasn't on probation, but I also wasn't laughing. I sat 2 rows from the windows, tucked behind the guy who smelled like Axe body spray and believed refactoring was a racial slur. My desk was chaos in neat disguise, 3 monitors, 2 post-it walls, and 1 dying succulent that somehow captured my spirit. I didn't do small talk. I did deliverables. I built the tools that saved our asses during the supply chain fiasco, the tools that made our dashboard usable by humans instead of AI cultists, and I rewrote the automation layer that the CTO claimed was divinely inspired. Yeah, he meant himself. Spoiler, I wrote it in a Red Bull coma at 2:14 a.m. on a Sunday. And for all that, my reward was a $30 DoorDash card and a pizza party that got rescheduled 3 times before someone finally forgot. That's when I stopped hoping. Oh, and hey, since you're here deep in the trenches with me, take a second to hit that follow and like button, will ya? 95% of folks listening to these never subscribe. It keeps the stories flowing and the petty vengeance sharp. Plus, it keeps our team of tired office survivors caffeinated and emotionally stable. Mostly. Anyway, where was I? Ah, yes, back to invisibility. See, being indispensable without being visible is a sick joke. You're the one holding the roof up, but when it starts raining inside, they blame you for not decorating. People called me the glue during happy hour. One guy called me the spreadsheet whisperer like it was a damn compliment. But when promotions came, they always forgot I was interested. When raises were handed out, I got a pat on the back and a next quarter for sure. It would have been easier if I hated the work. But I didn't. I loved it. Still do. There's a strange romance in clean code, in solving a logic puzzle that stumped 5 other people. I liked making things that worked, things that made people's jobs easier, even if they didn't know I was the reason. But love don't mean stupid. I saw what was happening. I watched the guys with louder mouths and weaker skills leapfrog me into director titles. I kept my head down, told myself it was temporary. But that temporary became 7 years. 7 years of almost there, of you're not quite leadership material yet, while I watched interns become managers just because they shared a vape with the VP after hours. And still, I stayed, not because I was weak, because I was planning. Because I was learning where every wire connected, where every trapdoor led, and how every system ticked. You'd be amazed how many logins I was quietly still listed on, how many platforms they forgot I architected entirely on my own. They thought they'd buried me under apathy and quarterly reviews. But I wasn't buried. I was burrowed. And if you've ever burrowed, you know what happens next. Someone steps wrong. Someone stomps too hard. And everything starts to cave in. The reorg came like a fart in church, sudden, awkward, and followed by a silence that said, "Don't ask questions or you're next." It started with the usual buzzwords: flattening the hierarchy, modernizing leadership, empowering the next generation. Translation: CEO was tired of pretending his failson wasn't a walking HR liability, and finally carved out a title for him like it was a participation trophy. Lucas, 30 years old, fresh off some 6-week executive acceleration experience hosted at a golf resort in Arizona. His qualifications? Well, once he sold an NFT to a YouTuber for 12 grand and told everyone he ran a tech startup. The startup, by the way, is a website that aggregated TikTok dance challenges and crashed if you clicked twice. They announced him at the all-hands like he was Christ descending from the LinkedIn heavens. We're excited to bring in a new strategic vision, the COO beamed, standing beside Lucas, who wore a $300 hoodie like it was chainmail. Lucas will be taking over operational oversight for the product systems unit. That was me. I was the product systems unit. Every tool, dashboard, script, pipeline, I built them, fed them, debugged them like they were temperamental toddlers. But now, I reported to Lucas. First meeting, he showed up 9 minutes late and eating a banana. He didn't open his laptop, just sat there scrolling something on his phone and nodding like he'd already solved world hunger. When I started walking him through our system dependencies and current sprint goals, he interrupted twice, once to ask if our backend was crypto-ready, and again to tell me, I don't need you to think, just execute. Execute like I was a printer. Like 7 years of system architecture was just a button press away from irrelevance. I chewed the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. By the next morning, my access to our codebase was limited. Not removed, limited. I could see some folders, but not commit. Could read logs, but not deploy. No explanation, no email, just revoked. I pinged IT. They said it must be a glitch. I asked twice, then they ghosted, and I knew. I dug around quietly like a raccoon in a corporate dumpster. That's when I saw it. A PDF in the shared documentation folder, uploaded by Lucas Tempedman, a folder that wasn't there yesterday. It was a rewrite of my optimization framework. Every method, every conditional, every comment line, still carrying my language, my fingerprints, but the authorship, compiled by Lucas B. I stared at the screen for a long time, then laughed. It wasn't even cleaned up. My initials were still in the changelog. My test cases, my naming conventions. He'd basically slapped his name on my car while leaving my old Taco Bell wrappers in the glove box. I thought about reporting it to HR. I really did. But then I remembered Lisa from accounting, who reported something similar 2 years ago. She built a forecasting model that her boss presented as his own. She ended up restructured and offboarded 3 weeks later, conveniently after the company filed its Q3 report using her work. So no, I didn't report it. I documented. I screenshotted. I saved logs. I exported the commit history. I took photos of my own goddamn whiteboard sketches. You see, they thought I was an old dog too scared to bite. What they didn't know, this old dog had already started marking the exits. And Lucas? He strutted around like the king of stolen castles, holding meetings with VPs where he misused the term machine learning and called APIs app things. Every time he swaggered past my desk, I smiled, sweetly, blankly. The way you smile at a man who doesn't realize his parachute's already been swapped for a laundry bag. The culture shifted fast. No more jokes in the break room. No more collaboration. Just people jockeying for Lucas's approval like it was 1999, and he was the DJ at prom. He started naming innovation squads with bro-y nicknames, renamed my dashboard the Speed Zone, asked if we could gamify our backend, told marketing I'd help them build a client war room even though I hadn't spoken to him since the banana meeting. I stayed silent, I watched, and in the silence, I started gathering. Everything, every line of mine he repackaged, every module renamed, every system I'd built that now bore his initials in the footer. I let him take, let him believe, because that's the thing about wolves in sheep's clothing. They forget some of us still remember how to hunt. I played it cool. That's the trick. You don't scream when the blade's already in, you twist it back slow when no one's watching. Outwardly, I adapted, showed up early, nodded during Lucas's jargon-soaked meetings, like his insights weren't lifted straight off a tech blog written by someone named CryptoBro95. Smiled when he called my database cleanup tool some neat backend sparkle. Even laughed when he suggested we rename the primary build to Lucas Core, like the software was a cologne. But inside, I was building fire. First thing I did was dig through my backups. The good ones I kept on an encrypted thumb drive shaped like a lipstick tube. Every version of my core systems, from early drafts to final rollouts, was in there, time-stamped, annotated, documented with blood, sweat, and screenshot receipts. A decade of digital DNA, all mine. Then I started taking meetings. To HR, to Lucas, to anyone watching, I was exploring new opportunities. I left my calendar open on purpose, dropped vague entries like consult, OPS track deep dive and conf call, infra support group. Let them think I was sniffing around for a better job. Lucas even cornered me in the break room once, smug as hell, and said, "Hey, if you're thinking of jumping ship, do me a favor and finish the Q4 rollout first." I blinked at him. Of course, I said, wouldn't want the ship to crash without a map. But those meetings, they weren't recruiters. They were IP lawyers, patent sharks in dress shirts, sipping green tea and asking all the right questions. Were you the sole creator? Yes. Any NDA governing these builds? Not for the pre-prototypes. Do you have logs, commits, email threads, Slack history? Buckle up. I brought them it all. I showed them how my original system, coded over long weekends while my ex accused me of marrying my keyboard, had been rolled into Nexico's infrastructure without a single license agreement. How their new automation tool still ran off a command string I invented 5 years ago while watching Jeopardy. In my pajamas, they didn't just nod, they smiled. That kind of slow, knowing smile that means someone else's lawsuit just walked into the room wearing lipstick and a badge swipe. They were the first people to call me a founder. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just an employee being erased. I was an owner whose house had been squatted in by rich idiots who couldn't read a blueprint. So I filed 3 provisional patents. Clean, ironclad. 1 for the system optimization layer, 1 for the automation integration logic, and 1 for the interface translator Lucas had recently demoed at Client Summit while mispronouncing the name of the script I'd written. It didn't matter if Nexico used them now. It mattered that I had the receipts, that I had the timestamps, that I had quietly, legally, put my name on the very bones of their product. I filed them in a coffee shop at 7:43 p.m. on a Wednesday. No champagne, no toast, just a quiet ping in my inbox and the low hum of righteous satisfaction vibrating through my spine. The kind of satisfaction that comes when you realize the people trying to bury you forgot you designed the damn shovel. At work, Lucas kept parading around like an emperor in a discount crown. A vision alignment session where he played a sizzle reel of fake UX mockups and said, "We're redefining the future, one API at a time." No one understood a word of it, but they clapped. And me, I clapped too, just a beat slower. It was surreal, watching them build their entire launch strategy on top of my code like it was Lego bricks and not live infrastructure. Every time they updated a tool or demoed a feature to investors, I'd watch closely. They catch it? Would someone finally realize the heartbeat of their platform still thumped to my cadence? They never did. But that's the problem with thieves. They're so busy admiring what they've stolen, they don't realize the owner changed the locks weeks ago. From the outside, I was just another overworked cog trying to make it to Friday. But from the inside, I was a bomb waiting to go off. And I had just started the countdown. All-hands meeting was held in the company's innovation lounge, which was just a rebranded storage room with LED strips and beanbags that smelled like gym socks and desperation. They brought in catered wraps, piped in some upbeat EDM, and handed out swag that said "Build the Future." I remember staring at that phrase on a branded water bottle, thinking, funny. I already did. Lucas strutted in like a homecoming king who just discovered PowerPoint, wore a bomber jacket over a Henley shirt, and looked like he'd Googled tech casual that morning and clicked the first image. Someone handed him a handheld mic, which he didn't need, but of course he used, because he thought it made him look like a TED Talk prophet. "Don't worry, I won't say it. Team," he began, pacing like he was too smart to stand still. "We've been running too slow, building too small. That ends today." Gestured toward the big screen as a slide popped up labeled, "The Lucas Framework." I blinked. Then I blinked again, because there it was, my workflow, my exact build. The one I'd spent years tuning like a violin in a hurricane. Only now it had been dumbed down into marketing slides with a font that looked like it came off a cereal box, and renamed, boldly, as if he'd conceived it during a fever dream while coding in binary with his toes. Clicked through bullet points like he'd written them himself. Unified data flow, my integration queue from last year, predictive load balancing, a copy-paste from my holiday week prototype, human-centered config panels, that one stung. I had sketched those on a napkin at my nephew's birthday party while someone spilled Fanta on my laptop bag. I scanned the room. Koo, nodding like he was watching the birth of sliced bread. Charlied, smiling wide enough to crack her buttocks. People clapped. Someone even whistled. Now, Lucas said, pausing for dramatic effect, this system didn't build itself overnight. It took bold thinking. It took leadership. It took vision. I swear, I almost burst out laughing. It wasn't bitterness anymore, it was surreal comedy. Like watching someone accept an Oscar for a movie you filmed in your garage on a flip phone. After the applause died down, my boss, one who hadn't spoken directly to me since Lucas's ascension, sidled over. "Hey," she said, almost sheepishly, "Lucas wants you to onboard our new junior developer. Walk her through the method, make sure she really gets it. I bit my tongue so hard I almost tasted childhood trauma, but I smiled. Of course, I said. Wouldn't want her to miss out on his brilliance. The junior dev showed up the next day, bright-eyed, fresh boot camp grad, nervous like a squirrel on espresso. She came to my desk with a notepad already full of Lucas quotes she'd written down from the presentation. So she said, sitting down, I read all the internal docs. Super inspiring stuff. Did you get a chance to work on any part of the Lucas system before he took over? I turned to her slowly. A few bits, I said, trying not to choke on my own sarcasm. But I'm mostly here to support his vision now. Spent the next 4 hours walking through code she'd already skimmed, but didn't understand. The real code, not the sanitized diagrams Lucas presented. She asked good questions. She picked it up fast. But more than once, she tilted her head and said, this part sounds a lot like the draft notes I saw in the old dev wiki. Weird, there's no attribution. I didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow and kept going. Later that night, I dug into the internal knowledge base, and there it was. A whole section titled Lucas Ops, Future Ready Foundations. Paragraph after paragraph of text pulled straight from my personal design journals, word for word in some places. The metaphors, the layout flow, even a typo I'd made once in a rush, efficiency instead of efficiency. He hadn't even corrected it. He hadn't stolen my work. He'd wholesale imported it. And no one noticed, because no one ever noticed me. Not unless something broke. Not unless I was late. Not unless they needed a scapegoat for a delay caused by a budget cut or a sales VP's hallucinated client demand. But that night, I noticed something else too. One of the paragraphs he'd lifted ended with a line I'd written as a joke to myself. Note to future self. If anyone ever calls this the Lucas method, I will personally puke into the mainframe. And it was there, still in the doc, unedited, undeleted. I stared at it. Then I laughed because he didn't even read what he stole. And I realized this wasn't just about credit anymore. It was about control. And it was about to be mine again. The summons came at 9:42 a.m., mid-sprint planning with the subject line, HR touchpoint calendar discrepancies. That's how they worded it. I'd misplaced a dentist appointment instead of being dragged into the bureaucratic gallows. I closed my laptop without a word, stood up, and took the long walk to the conference room HR always used for its little purges. You know the one? Neutral beige walls, sad ficus in the corner, a box of tissues so prominently placed it may as well have had a spotlight and exit music. Lucas was already there, sitting cross-legged, sipping from a thermos like he hadn't just marched my work into a PowerPoint parade. Across from him, Greta from HR, whose expression always hovered somewhere between I just found out Santa's fake and this is above my pay grade. Thanks for coming, she said, smiling like a mortician who moonlights as a kindergarten teacher. We've been reviewing some irregularities in your schedule. I blinked. Such as? Well, Greta said, scrolling through something on her tablet, are multiple calendar entries labeled Consult IP Scope Review, System Integrity Outline, and a few labeled Only Private, Legal. These aren't on your project docket. Lucas leaned forward, fake concern leaking from every pore. We're just worried about transparency. These kinds of entries, paired with your after-hours logins, raise some red flags. I tilted my head. Red flags? He nodded, like he was doing me a favor. Need to ensure there's no cross-pollination of proprietary material. Especially since your recent system access has been, let's say, partial. That's rich coming from the guy who revoked my keys and then presented my kitchen as if he'd invented food. So, Greta said, shifting in her chair like she needed to pee or puke or both, we just want to clarify, have you been communicating with external firms about company tools? I stared at her. Then at Lucas, at the glass of water they'd provided like it was supposed to soften the blow. I leaned back in my chair, laced my fingers over my stomach, and said calmly, if you're firing me, do it. Otherwise, I have work to finish. Silence. Greta blinked 3 times. Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it again. He didn't expect that. They wanted me flustered, maybe apologetic. Groveling would have been the cherry on his smug sundae. Instead, I stood. Let me know, I said. Before lunch would be ideal, and I walked out. Didn't storm, didn't slam a door, just walked like someone whose hands were clean and calendar was bulletproof. Because those meetings, every one of them was legal, private, and logged on my own time. I didn't bring company data. I didn't use company tools. I had been extremely, painfully careful, but none of that mattered. Lucas didn't care about facts. He cared about narrative, and HR. HR didn't care about justice. They cared about containment. Exactly 24 hours later, I got the email. Subject: termination of employment violation of confidentiality protocol. Effective immediately. Security would escort me to retrieve my belongings. A second email included a link to the NDA they claimed I had violated. No hearing. No appeal. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Arrived that afternoon with a cardboard box already labeled. Packed up my desk like I was flipping a breaker. Monitor cables, personal mug, succulent, that same damn succulent, half dead and still fighting. It felt poetic. The junior dev stood frozen by the kitchen, watching like a kid who just saw a magician get tackled mid-trick. People whispered. Nobody said goodbye, except Lucas. He appeared by the elevator with a half smile, arms crossed. No hard feelings. Said like I'd lost a game we both knew he rigged. I stepped into the elevator, turned around just before the doors closed, and smiled back. Cold, crisp, surgical, you caught me, I said. Then the doors sealed and he was gone. I didn't look back, not because I was sad, because I was already free. Because the minute they let me go, they let go of every claim they thought they had on what I'd built. And in doing so, they set the fuse. By the end of the week, office had chewed through my name and spit it out with a chalky taste of scandal. The company line was tight and rehearsed. She was let go due to conflicts of interest, breach of trust, potential leaks to competitors. In Slack threads and kitchen whispers, it got uglier. She'd been meeting with other companies for months. I heard she sold something to a rival firm. I always thought she was too intense. Kinda cold, right? Lucas, of course, loved every second of it. Walked around like he'd slayed a dragon. Kept saying things like, tough calls make strong teams, and we're pruning to grow. At one stand-up, someone overheard him say, she was brilliant, sure, but you can't have loyalty issues in a leadership role. That one spread like an office STD, quick, gross, and hard to forget. He even changed the Slack channel for dev announcements from #buildroom to #LucasLab. Like he was remixing my tombstone. Didn't respond, not publicly, not privately. A few colleagues messaged me, the usual suspects. Hey, just heard what happened, totally blindsided, hope you're okay. I always appreciated your guidance. Let me know if you ever want to grab coffee. Corporate sucks. Wishing you the best. None of them meant harm, but none of them risked anything either. And I had no time for pity couched in plausible deniability. I left them on read, because while they were gossiping, I was grinding. At home, I set up shop at my dining table. 3 monitors, 1 chair with lumbar support from hell, half a dozen hard drives stacked like little plastic tombstones beside a mug that read, I void warranties. I turned my apartment into a war room. Curtains drawn, phone silenced. Spotify playlist set to angry classical, Tchaikovsky on fire. The provisional patents were already filed. Now came the real beast, formal submission. It meant diagrams, process flows, legal notation so dry it could crack your soul in half. But I didn't flinch, because every clause I wrote was a nail in the coffin of Lucas's borrowed empire. I documented everything again. System structure, module lineage, timeline comparisons. I stitched together Slack logs, commit records, and even old Zoom recordings where I screen shared work in progress. In one of them, could see the prototype interface Lucas had demoed a week earlier. Only in my version, it was timestamped 3 months prior, with my voice explaining its quirks while eating a bagel. They thought they fired a liability. What they actually did was unshackle an architect with nothing left to lose. While Lucas posed for investor updates and bragged on LinkedIn about building a culture of resilience, I was on video calls with my legal team, showing them the actual bricks he was building with and exactly who made them. The patent attorneys were giddy. One even said, honestly, I haven't seen a cleaner claim set in years. I almost blushed. Almost. Meanwhile, my inbox pinged. A recruiter from a rival firm, heard you're free. Want to talk? Another message, this time from a senior engineer at Mexico. Lucas wants us to rename the audit script to something more alpha. Any chance you can remind me how it runs in legacy mode? No pressure. I didn't answer. Just screenshotted it. Labeled, dated, stored. The calm before a storm isn't silence, it's precision. It's the sharpening of blades behind closed doors, while the castle walls echo with laughter from fools who think they've already won. Lucas didn't know I had built everything on architecture modular enough to be legally severable. Didn't know that by terminating me without negotiation or severance, they voided their only informal access to my IP. And the best part? They never even asked what I did during those suspicious calendar entries. No one did, because they assumed I was reactive. But I wasn't. I was surgical. And soon, they were going to find out what happens when the invisible girl brings the receipts. The email came in at 6:17 a.m., time-stamped with the kind of surgical finality only lawyers and hurricanes can muster. Subject: patent acceptance notice, full protection granted. No confetti, no balloons, just 3 PDFs and a single-line message from my IP attorney, all filings accepted. Cease-and-desist drafts queued for dispatch. I stared at the screen, toothbrush hanging from my mouth, heart pounding in that slow, heavy way, not excitement, not fear, the quiet thunder of something irreversible beginning. The kind of moment you don't cheer for, the kind you respect. By 9 a.m., the first batch went out. Certified mail, digital copies, formal language that could stop a freight train. Each notice was clean, pointed, and named names, system modules, component layers, specific integration flows, all still active inside Nexico's platform. Tools I had authored. Tools that were now, indisputably, legally mine. A copy of each letter went to legal, to the CTO, and, bless my overachieving attorney, to the board of directors. CC'd, bolded, and delivered with pixel-perfect clarity. And then we waited. I imagined the morning there. Lucas rolling in late with his travel mug of overpriced cold brew, high-fiving a marketing intern, asking someone to circle back on the dashboard redesign, blissfully unaware that downstairs, in legal, someone was opening a PDF with his fingerprints all over a stolen empire. But I didn't sit idle. While they read legalese with growing nausea, I activated my second plan, investor radar. You see, a little clause in most early-stage contracts says that companies must disclose pending IP conflicts, especially if they affect delivery or deployment. I didn't have access to their internal communications anymore, but I did know their biggest clients. I knew those clients monitored GitHub activity like hawks on Adderall. So I had my lawyers send a client-facing clarification letter. Not aggressive, not threatening, just informational. A polite notification that certain modules within Nexico's environment were now protected IP under new ownership, and that usage without license could result in legal entanglements. The phrase legal entanglements was theirs, not mine. I would have just said a bad time. I waited. Less than 48 hours later, I got confirmation. The first client deployment had frozen. Not canceled, not deleted, just paused. Legal review pending. Risk mitigation in progress. It was a mid-tier logistics firm, big enough to hurt, small enough to panic. They'd built their entire routing platform on a Nexico tool I created in 2019 while recovering from pneumonia and boredom. Now they were reaching out to me, or rather, my LLC, to clarify licensing options moving forward. And just like that, the balance shifted. Not fully, not finally, but noticeably. Inside Nexico, I imagined the walls tightening. The devs suddenly quiet, the meetings tenser. Lucas pulling someone into a glass-walled conference room to whisper things like no big deal and we can pivot. HR pretending nothing happened while legal stared at code comments trying to scrub my initials like bleach would fix it. But you can't bleach a system that breathes your DNA. The junior dev I once trained posted on LinkedIn, "When leadership fails, systems break." Grateful to be learning from both. She didn't tag anyone. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. My phone buzzed. Message from a Nexico product manager I hadn't spoken to in 6 months. So, hypothetically, how much would it cost to license back Luca's ops? I stared at it, smiled, and didn't answer. Because this wasn't about money, not yet. This was about proof. This was about watching the story they tried to write over mine start to glitch and unravel. Quietly, I sipped my tea, opened a fresh tab, and began drafting my own deployment roadmap. Because if they wanted to use my system, they were going to do it legally, and on my terms. Inside Nexico, the oxygen started to thin. It began with legal forwarding my cease-and-desist notices to the CTO under the subject line, "Urgent, confirm authorship." They expected a 5-minute task, a formality. But instead, it triggered a forensic audit that would spill blood across every server the company ever touched. The CTO, man who had once called me the stability engine of our chaos, now had to face a paper trail he'd quietly ignored for years. He pulled up commits, version histories, internal documentation backups, everything. And there I was, in every single place he looked. Time-stamped. Signed. Owned. There were Git commits going back 6 years with my initials embedded in file names. Slack threads where I'd walked entire teams through design frameworks now rebranded as Lucas Ops. Code comments written in my exact tone, complete with inside jokes and typo tells. At one point, they found a script labeled Core v1.0 because Lucas broke it JS, a joke I'd made after a failed test deployment. It wasn't just undeniable, it was humiliating. Lucas, cornered in a meeting with legal, the CTO, and the VP of product, started flailing. "This is all part of my redesign," he insisted. "She helped with pieces, sure, but I drove the strategy. I guided the architecture. You removed her access and presented this at all hands as your original system," the CTO cut in. "There's metadata on every function block, her initials, her change logs, her flowcharts. But I refined it. You mean when you changed the names of the modules and reskinned the UI?" Lucas, shut up. Emergency meetings stacked on top of emergency meetings. Board was called in early from whatever golf course or startup incubator they were hiding in. The chairman himself demanded a breakdown of Nexico's entire infrastructure. How much of it relied on now contested IP? The answer? About 42% of their core product. Almost half. Nearly everything they were actively demoing to potential Series C investors. The COO tried to spin. The general counsel tried to bluff. HR tried to disappear. The facts wouldn't budge. And the patent filings, those were public now. Some legal blog picked it up. David and Goliath in the server room, one woman's IP war against Nexico systems. It spread like gasoline. They included screenshots from public GitHub issues, quotes from my cease-and-desist, even a side-by-side comparison of Lucas's new architecture and my original patent diagrams. Spoiler, they were identical, except mine had better labels. Article tagged my attorneys, who promptly shared it with a statement that ended with, "We stand by our client's right to protect her original work against unauthorized use by former employers." 3 hours later, the name of my patent firm trended on LinkedIn. That's when the VC sharks started circling. Back at Nexico, the investor relations inbox imploded. Clients demanded to know if their platforms were now legally compromised. An international client halted a $4.6 million contract citing uncertainty around IP provenance. That phrase got quoted in 3 industry newsletters the next morning. Lucas stopped posting on LinkedIn. His last update, proud of the work we're doing to revolutionize infrastructure, was quietly deleted, but not before someone screenshot it and turned it into a meme next to my patent number. I didn't gloat, not publicly. I didn't need to. Instead, I sat on my couch, hoodie on, watching the collapse unfold like a slow-motion car crash filmed in 4K calm, untouched. A ghost in the machine they thought they'd exorcised. I got a call from my attorney that night. "They want to talk," she said. "Who?" I asked, knowing the answer. "Nexico." "Well, the board. Lucas has been advised not to attend." I smiled. "Let them schedule something." Then I went back to building my own thing, my own code, my own terms. 'Cause the sword I'd just pulled from their gut, I wasn't done swinging it yet. The emergency shareholder call hit headlines before it even ended. Internal sources leaked just enough for reporters to piece it together. A confidential session turned bloodbath, directors yelling over legal counsel, investors demanding heads. And right in the middle of it all, Lucas, blinking like a kid caught plagiarizing his science fair project. By noon, Nexico posted a formal press release. Effective immediately, Lucas Bennett has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. We deeply regret the oversight and are conducting a full audit of our infrastructure and IP practices. Oversight, that's what they called it. Like he'd misfiled a spreadsheet instead of hijacking a multi-million-dollar software suite he didn't write. Still, it was something. The PR firm they hired couldn't polish it clean. Not this time. The fallout was swift. HR took the first blow, 2 directors ousted, including Greta, who once asked me if I was perhaps taking the whole authorship thing a bit personally. The CTO kept his job barely, but now answered directly to the board. And the VPs, 2 of them resigned before the week was out, their LinkedIn bios suddenly heavy with words like consultant, transition, and seeking new challenges. Then came the settlement. A lawyer called on a Tuesday. "They've agreed," she said, voice tight with professional glee. 7 figures, full acknowledgement of ownership. Future use to be licensed under your LLC with annual royalties if they wish to continue. No apology, no handshake. Just signatures, wires, and silence. I accepted. Not because I needed the money, but because it was proof. Proof that I was right, that I'd always been right, and they'd buried the wrong body. I never gave an interview, never tweeted, never shared a Medium post titled What Mexico Taught Me About Resilience. I wasn't interested in fame. I was interested in freedom. 3 weeks later, my LLC went live. I called it Foundry. Simple, solid. The place where things are built on purpose with care and with the name of the maker stamped right into the metal. I launched with 3 clients before the website even finished loading for the first time. The platform looked a lot like what I built at Mexico, but refined. Faster, cleaner, mine. No more feature requests from middle managers who thought refactor meant make it blue. No more egos with legacy last names dragging product deadlines through boardroom purgatory. Just real work, smart people, and ownership. And my first hire, the junior dev. She walked into our rented WeWork with a cautious smile and a notebook full of ideas. I handed her a laptop, a login, a chair. No stolen credit here, I said. If you build it, it's yours. She blinked, then grinned. We got to work. People ask me now if I've forgiven them. Lucas, the company, the whole chorus of backpatters and email forwarders who let it happen. I haven't, because forgiveness is something you offer when someone tries to make it right. They didn't. They tried to erase me, and instead, I became the watermark. The code still runs with my DNA in its veins, and every time they launch it, they pay me for the privilege. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.